because I already hit start stream. Okay, now I think we're live.
Nice.
Sorry. Anticlimactic wind down. Hello everyone. Welcome to the .NET Community Stand-Up for the tooling, the Visual Studio Tooling Edition. I'm Kendra Havens, your host, along with my co-host, Cody Thayer.
Hello.
Hello. For those of you who don't recognize us, I'm a program manager on .NET and Visual Studio. I mostly work on .NET tooling and Visual Studio. And Cody.
And I am a program manager on the Visual Studio for Mac team, and I'm mainly focused on the editor experience within Visual Studio for Mac.
Yeah, and we have very good representation today from the Visual Studio family, because with us is Bowden. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, like Kendra said, my name is Bowden. I work on Visual Studio Code, so we've got the trifecta of Visual Studio editors. And yeah, hopefully going to show you some cool demos about VS Code Remote today.
Yeah. Sorry if the title of the video still says triage process. That was going to be the topic, but instead we're lucky enough to have some VS Code demos to show. So we'll talk about that one later. Oh, sorry. Thanks for telling me my volume's low. Okay. So first off, we want to just show a couple community news things. I'm going to switch to Bowden's computer. Okay, so first off, we did a small announcement about how we're consolidating some of the .NET GitHub repos. Just wanted to call it out. There are going to be some major consolidations, especially with the .NET/platform. So that'll be the core CLR, core FX, core RT, core setup, and some portions of Mono all combined into one repo. I'm sure some of you have also experienced the frustration of, let's see, there we go, of basically opening issues on one repo and not knowing where they actually need to set up. So, and having to see your tickets moved constantly and multiple teams trying to figure out where it goes, that's not always fun. So we think combining them will be a little bit of a better process. And then I sent you one other link for the, that guy, oh, right. Okay, back to your screen. So Mads Christensen came up with a really interesting blog post on the status of Visual Studio feature suggestions. I'm a huge fan of Mads, and I think he outlined our process really well, and he actually gives really interesting estimates for what actually happens to all of the suggestions that people put in. Yeah, we got some Mads fans on chat. So that's always really, I don't know. Also, the comments were very passionate and almost therapeutic to read because we know DevCom is absolutely not perfect. And a lot of it was, I guess, feedback that I had given our teams for months. So I don't know. I actually just really appreciated the post and that it was a place where people could actually talk about what is not working and what we need to improve. So it was pretty interesting. Yeah, to have a place to comment.
Yeah, and DevCom, we do go through these comments now, so it's not like it's going into the ether. We are reviewing what goes into the developer community, so you do get your voice heard. There might be some issues with kind of the organization of it and whatnot, but you do still get your voice heard. So we do still appreciate anything you can add to developer community, either on the problems or suggestion side, because it is viewed by one of us most likely, or another engineer or program manager on the team. So we do appreciate the time it takes to fill in those suggestions.
Yeah, I think people might underestimate how many eyes are actually on it before we are able to give a status update.
Yeah,
I've had sometimes users have commented on bugs like, why isn't this updated? And I know there's an active email chain with like 12 different people on it, and we're still trying to figure out who would actually fix that issue. And I know I hate to bring up like all of the, I guess, Microsoft internal team drama trying to figure out who owns what and where it would fit on their backlog, but yeah, it is a task, and it might take a while before we're able to give updates. But this isn't about suggestion triage. We'll do that in a different episode. Okay, cool beans.
Sweet.
Yeah, Cody, did you have one more thing you wanted to call out?
Yeah, so we just released preview 2 of the next version of Visual Studio for Mac, which would be 8.3. Yes, I believe so. Anyway, so there's some cool stuff that's coming to Visual Studio for Mac in the next version. One of the things that I'm most excited about, and something that has been requested by our community quite a bit, so we're happy to get this out. I think this is one of the top asks on developer community, is the ability to manage NuGet packages at the solution level. So previously in Visual Studio for Mac, you would have to manage the NuGet package for each project independently. So if you updated it in, say, a shared project, you had to update the package in the platform project as well. Now you can update them in one place, and you can manage them in a lot more refined manner. So it's a cool feature. Please, if you are a Visual Studio for Mac user, check out the preview by switching to the preview channel in Visual Studio for Mac and give it a try, because it's going to be great. We're excited about it, and we'd like to get some feedback on how it works for folks, and if there's anything that we can do to improve it as we get nearer to the final release of it. So check it out.
Sweet. Okay, can I ask the spicy question? Is this yet another package manager, or did we take in stuff that already exists into our design?
We took in stuff that already exists into our design, so it's yes. It's not a whole new world.
Okay.
It feels very similar to the Visual Studio Windows side. I don't know why I'm pointing at my other computer, because that's the one I see you guys on. So it is a lot similar to that, and it should feel at home for folks. So yeah, try it out. There's other great features in preview 2 as well, including multi-targeting support, the ability to choose a specific browser when you are testing the ASP.NET Core page, or if you need to test it on browser ABC, you can launch that browser instead of the default browser. So there's some fun stuff that just makes life
and
easier.
Edge Chromium.
Exactly, Edgium.
Edgium, that's right.
Dev and Canary. So
yeah, have you updated to Edgium?
Yeah, I use it.
I did, and Edge crashes so much less. It was so nice. I didn't know I was living in the past without it, but you basically have to be on the developer channel in order to get a really functional Edge. It's nice. Okay.
Yeah, I like having the E logo on my Mac. It feels kind of like this is a whole new world.
Solidarity.
Yeah, it feels edgy. There we go. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, let's dive into Bowden's demos without further ado. So remote extensions in Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, so if you want to flip over to my screen, I can give you a little background. So the idea is basically there's a lot of scenarios where you have your local dev box, but then you may have a remote VM or some other kind of remote compute that you are constantly pulling and pushing and syncing code back and forth from. And in all of these scenarios, for a long time, there's been multiple different solutions. Some of them are for VMs, you can SSH in, use Vim, use lightweight tools that are easy to install on any box at any time. For other scenarios, you sometimes set up rsync so that as you write code locally, it's constantly trying to copy files back and forth. For Docker containers, someone mentioned Docker, and we're definitely going to show that. You can have local and remote hosted Docker containers, and you're constantly kind of mounting files back and forth. You're trying to make sure that the environment you're working in is encapsulated, yet your editor does not live inside that environment. And so all of these kind of situations have been workable for a long time, and there's been a lot of tools that have existed to promote this development pattern. But there's little quirks and edge cases, and it's not buttery smooth. And really what you want is to take the tools that you know and love and use them anywhere. Wherever your code lives, you can connect there with your tools. And so basically with VS Code, the remote extensions, and it's an extension pack, there's the SSH containers and WSL extensions. But effectively what they're doing is you have your local operating system on your local machine running VS Code, but it's kind of a thin client. You only get the UI extensions, you only get the front end of VS Code, and then you can connect it to a remote VS Code server, which can be installed in any of these environments I've listed: SSH on a VM, a container, whether local or remote, or WSL in the WSL Linux partition on Windows. And you basically communicate back and forth between the two, where you have a VS Code version running in the same location, in the same context as your code. And so this makes it a lot easier for VS Code to know your context and all your tools to work as expected. Like LiveShare, kind of. It is like LiveShare in that when you connect LiveShare to someone else's machine, you're connected to where the source code actually lives.
Yeah.
And then, you're kind of funneling commands back and forth. And so in the same kind of spirit, you're just installing a remote server, which doesn't have any of the UI components of VS Code. It's just all of, the language services and the compilers and the tools and the debuggers. All of that stuff lives with the code in that context. Remotely. Yeah. So yeah, instead of just talking about it all the time, let me actually show you how it works. So I'm gonna flip over to VS Code. I'm an insider.
Look at all those extensions.
But these extensions, they're available in stable as well. They've been out for about 2 months now. And so I'm just,
already stable, huh?
That's right, already stable. And so I'm going to just go ahead and open a folder. Actually, we'll start with containers. And so the same idea applies. We're going to basically have our local operating system, our local VS Code, which is here. And if you notice my little whale on the top, we've got Docker up and running. And basically, we're going to create a container. We're going to install VS Code Server inside of it. And then kind of mount in our source code, as you see the volume mount. And all of this is going to happen automatically for us. And to show you that there's no smoke and mirrors, I'm actually going to grab a repo from scratch. There are a bunch of them you can try. If you come to our docs, codevisualstudio.com, docs, remote containers, you can see kind of all of the options, but they follow the pattern: VS Code, remote, try, choose your language or technology. And so there's Python, Go, Java, .NET, and so on. I'm going to be using Node because that's what I am personally most familiar with. But I can go ahead and git clone this guy and then switch into VS Code remote try Node. And then I'm just going to reopen code in this -r is just going to reopen this window in this folder. And so you'll see I've kind of loaded this folder, and I immediately get this pop-up that says, this folder contains a dev container configuration. Would you like to open this inside the container? And I'm going to say, go ahead, sure. And what this is going to start doing, you'll notice I have opened a new window. And damn, that was really fast. That kind of ruined the explanation, but that's kind of the point.
It's getting harder and harder to demo these things.
Exactly. Basically what happened, and I'm going to pop open this dev container. We have a dev container JSON, which describes both the Docker image we want to use to build the container. And so you see we reference our own Docker file, but if you wanted to, you could just reference an image straight up. And then you'll notice in our Docker file, we say this is Node. We want to do some stuff to get, Yarn and some other tools, but pretty standard Docker file. And then we have a
Sorry, I think I just wanted to ask you, git clone to brand new repo. Is this on your local machine, or was there a special command that cloned that to
This is on my local machine.
Okay, so you're setting up your local machine right now, and we're going to remote into it later?
My local machine is currently, if we flip over to a normal terminal, if we go... This is on my local machine, so this is VS Code remote try node. All of this is right here.
Okay.
And if we, open up code stable so that we have two going side by side.
Yeah.
This is the
so
same repo. So
you're going to have one VS Code instance remoting into the setup that is in a completely different folder as if it was on another machine?
Sort of, yeah. So
okay.
we are running Docker. We're running Docker locally.
Yeah.
And so we create the container, and inside that container, we have mounted in our local file system.
We are remoting into a container.
Anything I change here, for example, if I, foo.js, will be reflected over here, right?
Okay.
Because we've mounted in the file system. It's effectively changing the files on disk, but we're inside of a Docker container. And you can see that by if I run node version, you see I have 10.15.3, which is the exact node version we asked for in the image, the latest 10. And if I come back over here, Yeah.
What do you have installed?
Great question. Oh, that's awkward. 10.15.
The same one.
Yeah, it's a good version. All right, let's see if npm is different. No, it's not. All right, well, this kind of defeats the purpose of the demo. Wow.
We'll find something that's different.
I can uninstall Node to really prove the point.
Do you have .NET? Because .NET, if it's installed on your machine, you can do .NET -- version.
How about uname-a?
Okay, and I'm betting it's not in the container at all. So it'll be like, I can't find this. I don't have .NET installed.
Exactly.
See, everyone? It is a different machine.
Thanks for the backup, Kendra. There we go. But yeah, so basically we've got this Docker container running locally. If we go back and look at the setup of this container, we build the image, we run the image, and if we pull up the handy, let's see, do I have the Docker extension? No, I don't. But if we do Docker PS, you can see our VSCode try remote container is running. And so I didn't have to start that from Docker CLI like I normally would have. This all just happened when we connected to the container. And so you'll see we kind of run all these Docker commands for you to set everything up. And then we install the VS Code server. And then finally, we do a little bit extra stuff, which is also defined in the dev container. We reference an app port. And so we do port forwarding from inside the Docker container to localhost. And that is useful because now we can run the app from inside the container. First, I'll install the dependencies real quick. And then when I hit F5 to launch the app, you'll see that it's 0003000 because this is running locally inside of the Docker container. But because we mapped this port, I can just go to my browser and hit localhost 3000. And hello, remote world.
Hey, cool.
And so the nice part about this is...
Hold on, that's where we pause.
Oh, yes, that's right. Carry on.
Okay,
yes.
cool.
Please, bring on the praise.
It happened.
So the cool thing about this, right, is as you noticed, because I'm in the Docker container, all of my dependencies are encapsulated. My whole dev environment is encapsulated. If I want to do things here, it's not going to impact my local machine, which is really nice. You can imagine having multiple projects with multiple different dependencies on different versions of .NET, and you can spin them all up in their own containers and have none of that leak out into your local machine. It makes it really easy to try projects. You could imagine not knowing how to set up a project, not knowing what versions you need to install, and by just cloning something with a dev container, Docker takes over all the dependencies, the image gets built automatically for you, and you're connected, and you have all your local dependencies. And so there's a lot of benefits with Docker.
So would you be recommending, like, if I have some kind of external tool, but I know in order to develop on it, if people want to use it, I know they need certain things set up. Are we at the point yet of just recommending, grab our container, connect to it to a VS Code remote session, and do live your life? So
what we recommend for open source projects is to actually include a dev container in your repo, and you'll notice that Angular,
we are living in the future. Okay.
Angular has a dev container included, which is nice because if you've never built Angular before and you want to contribute to Angular, you need to understand, their entire contributing guide, which requires installing Java so you can run their tests, which is a little bit unintuitive working on a web package. But the nice part is with the dev container, you can spin up the entire project, build it, run the tests, not worry about muddying up your local environment, make your contribution, and then tear down the container when you're finished.
Wow.
And so this is kind of the dream for open source, right? It makes it very, very trivial for contributors to quickly build and run your project with no knowledge of how it's set up.
No more setup.exe or
exactly,
or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or if it does exist, you don't have to run it because Docker will do it for you.
The container should be prepared.
There's a question in chat. Can you make persistent changes? Absolutely. Because we're volume mounting our local drive, any changes you make are going to be saved back to disk on localhost. As I mentioned, we create this foo file. And this is, of course, not valid JavaScript, but just to prove the point.
We can break it.
Exactly. We hello world, and, back on the local outside of the dev container, here we are. And, of course, now everyone's mad at me. So that's cool. And so it's really nice to be able to just develop like this, but the real benefit comes from the fact that this is full VS Code. VS Code server knows how to run all of your extensions. If we have ESLint, if we have any of our extensions, if we want to install more extensions, we can do that. You'll notice here in the extensions tab, they're showing me the extensions I have installed locally and the extensions I have installed remotely. And this is an important distinction because you might want a different set of extensions in a local environment than you would in your dev container. And so you can kind of tweak the dev container to have only the extensions and tools you need for that project. And those are also can be specified in the extensions portion of the dev container JSON. You see this project says just give us ESLint.
So I have definitely hidden a lot of extensions that I don't use in every project. So now I could also just, I don't know, encapsulate them in a remote instance. Interesting.
And so extensions, of course, work as you'd expect. The other thing that is a big one for most developers is the debugger. As you'd expect, we can just, because we're passing the port through, we can just go refresh our page and hit breakpoints like you would expect. Because again, the VS Code server is literally running in that Docker container. And so it connects to the debug port locally as you would if you were just running locally, and then passes all the debug information through.
Yeah. So chat was, do you have to rebuild the container? Or so you don't have to rebuild the container,
You don't have to rebuild the container unless you make changes, right?
Yeah.
Of course, if you come change your Docker file, you'll need to rebuild. But
like
otherwise,
environment changes.
Exactly.
Just changing your code or rebuilding or all of that stuff, you're already inside the container.
Right. And once you build once, connecting is super fast. And so I can reload the window. It's going to restart VS Code, reconnect to remote, and you'll see it's setting up the dev container again. But just like that, it took maybe 3 or 4 seconds to stop VS Code server, start it back up, connect the dev container, and we're back going again.
What's the biggest solution you've done remote connection with?
Probably Angular. Angular is a big one.
Okay.
This is a project that I never actually run the tests for. I've contributed or tried contributing. I don't know if they've ever actually taken any of my PRs, but I've tried a couple times.
I wonder why. No,
that's right. And I never ran a test, and so I don't. Do I deserve it? Yes.
Yeah.
But with a dev container now, it's trivial, right? The thing that always tripped me up was getting the right Java version, and I don't even need to know which Java version it has anymore. It just works.
Yeah.
And so that's very nice. And so that's VS Code remote in a container, which is cool. Another one I want to highlight is the SSH extension. And so I'm going to go ahead and close out of this, grab my other window.
We gotta ask if there are plans to bring this to Visual Studio. In some ways, we have been making debugging in containers possible for it. Even back in 2017, we had Docker tools for Visual Studio. It has been evolving, but this is sort of a new approach that's mostly using live share, which I don't think we had been using before. So I can sync up with that team, I suppose, unless you have knowledge on. I'm
more fuzzy on the Visual Studio side of the house.
Yeah.
Of course, the beauty of trying things in VS Code first is we can work out all the kinks and kind of get feedback very quickly. And then once it's good and stable, and we figured out what people like and what they don't like, then we kind of expand them across all of the family of products.
Right.
But I'm not super familiar with the timeline there.
Yeah, we can follow up with that.
You mentioned live share, which is interesting because live share is just an extension. We just saw extensions work in remote, and so you can connect to a container, start a live share session, and then invite other people to join you.
So remote within a remote.
Yeah, so it all just works.
It's remotes all the way down.
Exactly,
right.
Remoteception. So the next one I want to show you is the SSH extension. And so to connect to that, I'm going to flip over and show you. I've got a VM running in Azure. It's a very standard Ubuntu Linux VM. 2 gigs of memory, so it's kind of a wimpy machine, but for the demo it'll work. And if you come down here to the bottom left, I showed earlier that this said connecting when we were connecting to the remote container. And this is kind of your remote status bar. It tells you what context you're in. Right now, it shows nothing because we're local. But
what was the keyboard? Is that just Command P?
I just clicked on this to pull up the menu. You can also.
So that's your recent.
So this is just showing you all your remote options that are remote specific because we're clicking on this.
Clicking on that.
But if you
connection arrows at the bottom. Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
Thanks. That's what I was wondering.
But you can use command the command palette Control Shift P, and you look for remote, and then you get all the remote options. And there's quite a few more than we show here, but these are the ones you're most likely to use. And so you see we've got containers, and we also have SSH. And so I'm going to go ahead and connect to a host, and demo VM I've already set up. But all this is doing is really looking at a SSH config. And we have a viewlet down here, which also shows all of your remote connections. And clicking this shows where the config file actually is. And so all there is to configuring this VM is a host name and a user. And of course, to make the security handshake work, I had to copy over my SSH public key to the VM, but I did that before we started. Okay. And if you're curious and you're familiar with Azure, the way you do that is just over here in password. For me, it's reset password, but you would just put your username and paste in your public key. But I already did that ahead of time. And so at this point, we can make our connection, and it's already done, but we'll do it again for demo's sake. This time we'll do it from the viewlet. I'm just going to click connect here.
We're showing like a doc in the beginning on Visual Studio Code docs. Does this include how to set up that? That was fast.
Absolutely, yes. And so we have the full docs on docs VS Code docs remote overview again in the sidebar. But there's a step-by-step tutorial we wrote as well in the remote tutorial section, which will walk you through specifically how to set this up with Azure.
Oh, sweet.
And so once you get the extension, it walks you through creating a VM on Azure, configuring it, generating your SSH key if you don't have one yet, and then copying and pasting it in and configuring shutdown and all those sorts of things.
Okay. Sorry.
That said, it doesn't just work with Azure. It works with any VM you might have, any remote machine. It doesn't even have to be a VM. You can kind of connect to
so you
anything.
do this like on-prem as well.
Anything that can be reached with SSH.
That's great.
Then that works. We got a quick question about the theme. I don't even know at the moment. This is the default dark VS theme. So you can get this one right out of the box by just going to color theme, dark Visual Studio. So we connected to, I lost my window. So I'm going to do it again. We're connecting all sorts of to VMs, and you see it's again pretty quick. All it's doing is creating an SSH connection in which it's passing all of this information over. And so now you see we are in VMworld. If we do our .NET version again, you'll see that I have no .NET. If we do node version, I think I installed one. Yeah, this is 8.10, so I installed this one. I don't know, who knows whenever this VM was created.
So does open folder, oh my gosh.
Opens folders on your VM. And you'll notice none of my local files are here because we're on a completely remote VM this time. If I wanted to, I could do some sort of file syncing, but kind of the beauty of being on a VM is it's completely separate. And so I'll go ahead and open my home folder, create a, let's see, I think I have npm. Yes, so I'll go ahead and generate an Express project. Let's make a demo folder, and I'll just create a quick Express project with the Express generator. And now the cool thing again is we're completely remote on this VM, but VS Code still works entirely as you'd expect. So even from the terminal, if I want to open, let's see, are we in Insiders? Yes, we are. If I want to open I am not. I want to open a new window from command line, I can do that, and it knows that I was remote, and so it's going to open another remote connection with that folder. And so everything that you've done, everything you're used to doing in VS Code, it just kind of works.
Wow.
Right? And so again, we just open a new VS Code folder in this context. And so now I can install my dependencies just like last time.
If you're pausing for a second,
yes.
There was a question, how do you copy a file on local disk to a VM? If you can show that, I would also be curious. Because you said there's ways.
There are ways, yes, there's multiple ways.
Drag and drop? Is that
That
for
is a
the
great
simple
question.
ones of us?
I don't actually know. Let's
I think
find
that
out.
Transfer via with an SSH connection, you can transfer files through like
SCP.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's some ways you can do it. I like FTP, you can or you can no, you can do it old school.
I don't know if we'll actually do this for you, but oh my god, welcome to the future. Yes.
Okay, so drag and drop.
Drag and drop. Apparently we support
also,
that.
those other ways.
Shame on me. I should have known that.
Wow, that was really cool.
So you don't need FTP anymore, really. You can just drag and drop.
Sorry, can you look up the folder location of where the... Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it has to be... Okay, it was copied into the remote VM just that quickly.
So yeah, so we installed our dependencies. We can, F5 to... Oh, this app hasn't been configured because I just generated it. But we can run F5 on a node process and it'll start our node process. But this time we don't have a dev container JSON telling us that, hey, we're mapping these ports, but we can still do port forwarding. If we come back to the viewlet over here, the remote SSH viewlet, we can say we want to forward port 3000 and we'll call it 3000. And it will set up a port forwarding for us. And if we copy this, it just picks a random port unless you configure it with more config information, but I didn't. And so we're gonna, that is not, oh yeah, there we go. I guess it went straight to 3000. Oh, because 3000 is not in use anymore. There we go.
Oh,
that's fantastic.
Okay.
If 3000 was in use, it would give you a random port, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's nice. So we're, again, locally in our local machine, mapping this port to our VM as if we were running this on our local machine.
And since you do it on your local machine, it tends to like bypass anything you'd have to worry about with firewalls and whatnot because it's all going in this type of local machine environment. So it tends to work in all sorts of different environments. That's amazing.
Exactly. And again, just for
So are you like ruining your Ignite talk right now? Like this is massive stuff.
It only gets better.
How long did we work on this? When did we release it?
It's been cooking for a while. We released it probably two months and change.
Okay.
And so it's been out for a little bit. But it's still very new, right? We've been iterating very fast. It's been one of these things the community is pretty excited about because it's very different. It changes the paradigm for how you do remote development. Especially there are certain workflows like Python developers doing ML, right? They need big, beefy machines. Your local, little laptop with 4 gigs of RAM isn't going to run your model very quick. So you can spin up a VM with 128 gigs of RAM and 64 CPUs and do your development there. We also see a lot of people who have specific requirements such that you cannot connect to, say, the test database from your laptop. Only a domain joined machine can connect to the database. Therefore, you do all of your development in a VM that's on your local network. And so you can be at home on your laptop on a VPN connection to your office, remote into that machine, do your development there, and then your app can connect to the database that's locked down, right?
All you need is good internet.
Right. And so now...
And not even that great internet because it's
this is
efficient.
like low, yeah.
You're not sending the entire UI over. There's no remote desktop anymore. You're just sending over only the information you need, and all of the UI is handled by the thin client.
That's amazing stuff. That's great. And I think it's the cool thing also from a learning perspective is that, as you showed with Angular, how easy it is to test out new technologies as well without requiring to install all these different prerequisites on your computer and whatnot. I think that's a huge win for people who want to test out Angular or .NET or anything else that they don't necessarily want to install the dependencies for. And that's amazing.
It definitely lowers the barrier to entry.
Yeah, right.
Especially for there are certain project types that are hard to set up. For example, I had personally never tried a Rust app because I didn't know how to set it up in the past. but now you just go grab a Rust dev container, and boom, now you have a Rust environment, and now you can go play. Same with Go, same with Java. If there's any of these technologies you've shied away from because you're scared of setting it up, I mean, you don't need to worry about that anymore.
Or testing out beta versions of things that you don't want to install your production environment. You don't want to mess up with your dev box. You can always have a beta container and test out these new versions of whatnot. Like a lot of stuff in, .NET 3 coming out that you might want to test out, but don't necessarily want to install .NET 3 on your main development machine. Use this containerized approach or use this SSH approach to test out these new technologies. Play some C# 8.
We've also heard from a bunch of dev leads that, onboarding new members to a team becomes trivial. You're no longer trying to figure out how to set up their, machine, right? Wow. You're just, here's the repo, clone it, open it, and go. And so there's
I was just gonna say, like, documentation even would be easier because there's no chance of people like copying in the wrong stuff in different folders and deciding it doesn't deserve to be in program files and dragging it out. And so many times you just need to update your docs because people decided it needed to live in different places.
Exactly.
But now it'll all be in the same like folder structure.
It feels very satisfying, kind of like if you've ever set up CI before, and you pull in all the right dependencies and you build the app and everything just gets built and tested automatically. That satisfaction from just doing a git push and then everything just working. Yeah. It's the same kind of thing. You open a repo, you hit F5, and it just works. You get that same kind of, I don't need to worry about these things anymore. I can just focus on my code.
Exactly.
Like, I don't expect just cloning a repo to be able to debug it. That's just has been the state
Welcome
of
to
technology.
The future, Kendra. Welcome to the future.
Yes. We're making progress. Okay. Is there anything on a container that needs to be reviewed and patched by a Windows update?
Generally, no.
Yeah, you just need to pull the next container version.
Right.
So if it's a security bug, they'll release a new security image.
Containers are nice because they are, for the most part, immune to changes in the surrounding operating system, which is one of the big draws to them in the first place. Is as long as you can build the image and start the container, you don't really care what operating system you're running on. You could be Linux, Mac, or Windows. You're completely encapsulated from the surrounding environment, and so usually, for the most part, you're immune to any changes in the environment as well.
Yeah, it's super sandboxed, and for people who have security concerns, that's just a great reality as well.
It is worth noting, if you're on Windows, there are some kind of gotchas for Windows or Docker on Windows specifically.
Yeah, tell me about the bad things. I'm getting too excited.
And we've got quite a large section in here somewhere.
Known limitations.
Yes, right. So the
features.
Like I said, we came out 2 months ago, and so there's still a bunch of things that do not work that we're aware of. For example, if you have a Windows container, not a Linux container, that's not going to work. Docker desktop on Windows requires a couple of extra things. This first one is actually no longer true. Docker pushed an update recently where as soon as you try to mount a local volume, they ask for permission on the fly, so you no longer have to configure it in advance. But there's a handful of little gotchas there. We have specific troubleshooting guides just for Windows where you can go to the Docker docs themselves. But in general, this is more of the first time you set up Docker, regardless of remote containers. These are kind of generic Windows and Docker problems that we've been working through beyond remote development. And once you get them sorted out once, you never have to worry about it again. Once you have Docker running, once you got your whale icon, generally you're set. From there, you can check out repos, build the container, remote to them. You can create your own Docker files. You can create your own images. All of that good stuff.
Love it. That's amazing. I'm kind of like, I got all these situations going through my head. Like,
I know, I'm like so excited for. I'm thinking of like students who can just pull containers and get started.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
I know. Okay, cool. Was that it?
That's it. That's what I got. There's one more that I unfortunately cannot demo easily because I'm on a Mac, but the last extension is WSL. And I can briefly talk about that.
Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Windows Subsystem for Linux, yes. So the nice part here, WSL's of course been around for a long time. WSL 2 is coming as well, and it's going to make using Docker inside WSL on Windows even easier, as well as some other things. And if you think of WSL as essentially a Linux VM running on Windows, then the remote extension works in more or less the same way. When you connect to WSL from VSCode, you are inside of that Linux environment. Everything that's available there is available to you in VSCode, and it just kind of bridges the gap. And so you don't have to anymore have your environment installed both on the Windows side and the Linux side. You can just have it on the Linux side. As a more detailed example, in WSL, if you install Python and then you open up a Python project in VS Code, we'll use the Python running in WSL to power your IntelliSense to run the app. Whereas normally you would have to have that installed on the Windows side to power the IntelliSense, and then you'd be using the Linux WSL version to power the actual running app. And then if you have any version discrepancies there, you run into some weird setups. And so this is nice for WSL users because you just have VS Code running in the same place that your code exists. Sweet. Because I'm on a Mac, the only way I could really show that is if I showed you WSL installed on Parallels.
Yeah.
But let's not go there.
No, that's okay. I think honestly, you've demoed enough.
Yeah, you've amazed
so,
us.
so cool.
That's right.
Well, we can talk about NuGet level package management again, but this is amazing stuff. This is I think that the rate at which these advancements are coming out from all over is just mind blowing. So this is going to change a lot of people's development approaches, and that's huge.
Yeah, I guess computers were a good idea.
Yes. Whoever started that should really get it.
Cool. Well, if we don't have any comments, more topics, or anything that we want to address, I think we can wrap up this live stream. Thank you so much for coming on the show. That was awesome.
Happy to be here.
Cool. I'm pretty sure we did ruin your Ignite demo. Like, I don't know what you're going to show
Oh, it
now.
only goes up
or
from
like
here.
A
It
.NET
only goes
Con.
up from here.
Okay, cool.
Stay tuned. That's
Okay.
right. You'll have to watch.
This was a good dry run for that too. So
there we go.
it worked well. So.
Yeah, this might be a preview. No. Okay, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.